The garbage hit Harper Collins's desk at exactly 11:47 a.m., splattering rotted cafeteria food across her late mother's memorial photo. Coach Martinez watched from his office window and smiled. By 12:15 p.m., that same coach would be in handcuffs. Trent Sullivan would be expelled, and Harper's secret recording would be playing on every news channel in Colorado. What started as another day of systematic harassment at Westfield High would end with a federal investigation, 3 criminal charges, and one military father showing an entire school district what happens when you target the wrong soldier's daughter. We've all seen bullying, but few have witnessed what happens when a cover-up meets a Marine colonel. Every parent watching this is probably wondering, would my child be strong enough to fight back? Would I be brave enough to stand up to the system? Harper Collins is about to show us what courage really looks like. Harper Collins had buried her mother 6 months ago and buried her voice along with her. At 16, she carried herself with the careful precision of someone raised in military discipline, her blonde hair always regulation neat, her posture unconsciously at attention. The silver locket around her neck contained her mother's final photo, the one thing she'd salvaged from the crash that changed everything. Moving from Fort Carson to civilian Westfield High felt like deploying to hostile territory. Where base schools ran on respect and order, Westfield operated on cliques and cruelty. Her father, Colonel James Collins, had warned her that civilian schools were different, but nothing prepared her for the systematic brutality disguised as school spirit. The hallways reeked of privilege and predatory behavior, where football players prowled like apex predators and coaches turned blind eyes to anything that might damage their precious win records. Harper's first day had been a masterclass in institutional indifference, watching teachers scatter like startled birds whenever certain students approached. Westfield High's football program generated millions in revenue, and Coach Bradley Martinez treated his players like untouchable gods. Trent Sullivan, the Golden Boy quarterback with Division I offers, ruled the school through fear and his father's donation checks. 6 feet 3 inches of artificially inflated confidence, Trent moved through hallways like he owned them, because, in many ways, he did. Behind him slithered Bryce Patterson, Coach Martinez's nephew, a wiry predator who knew his uncle would cover any transgression with the efficiency of a military operation. The administration had perfected the art of selective blindness. Female students learned to avoid certain hallways, certain boys, certain situations that might trigger the kind of incident that required paperwork. Those brave enough to file complaints found themselves mysteriously transferred to other districts, or their academic records accidentally damaged beyond repair. The message was crystal clear: football revenue trumped student safety. Every single time. Kelsey Morrison commanded the social media battlefield with the precision of a psychological warfare specialist. Her manicured fingers could destroy reputations faster than most people could type, orchestrating harassment campaigns that left victims isolated and administrators blameless. She'd perfected the art of plausible deniability, always ensuring her cruelty looked like concerned school spirit to anyone over 30. Harper's first mistake was sitting at their table in the cafeteria. Her second was not running when Trent's crew surrounded her like wolves circling wounded prey. Her third was believing Coach Martinez would help when she reported the harassment, not realizing that the fox was already guarding the henhouse. What she didn't know was that her iPhone had been recording in her backpack pocket since homeroom, automatically uploading to military-grade cloud storage her father had installed for family safety. What Coach Martinez didn't know was that Colonel Collins had taught his daughter to document everything, a lesson learned from decades of military intelligence work. What none of them knew was that Harper's seemingly dead phone had been gathering evidence for 3 weeks. building a case that would make federal prosecutors salivate. The quiet military girl they'd targeted for systematic destruction was actually a walking surveillance operation, trained by one of the most decorated intelligence officers in the Marine Corps. The first assault on Harper's dignity began subtly, the way all effective campaigns start. Kelsey Morrison launched her whisper offensive during second period, spreading carefully crafted rumors about the military brat who thought she was better than local kids. Social media harassment followed like clockwork. Fake accounts posting about Harper's privilege of having base housing, while real locals struggled with mortgage payments. Anonymous comments appeared on school forums, questioning why military families received special treatment when hometown heroes barely scraped by. Harper noticed Coach Martinez coaching Kelsey on proper documentation of conflicts. The first crack in what would become a massive conspiracy. Their hushed conversations in his office during lunch periods weren't coincidental guidance. They were strategic planning sessions for psychological warfare. The coach's involvement suggested this harassment campaign wasn't random teenage cruelty. It was institutional policy disguised as peer conflict. Her lunch table mysteriously became reserved every day, forcing Harper to eat alone while surrounded by hostile whispers. Students filmed her isolation, posting content with #military meltdown that spread through the school's social networks like digital poison. The cafeteria became a theater of humiliation, where Harper's pain provided entertainment for audiences hungry for someone else's suffering. By Thursday of her second week, Harper found her locker vandalized with "Go back to base, Army brat," scrawled in permanent marker. The words had been carefully positioned to avoid security cameras, suggesting intimate knowledge of surveillance blind spots. Her uniform shirt was doused with spoiled milk during passing period, forcing her to wear gym clothes that marked her as different, vulnerable, worthy of continued targeting. Students recorded her shame walk to the nurse's office, phones thrust in her face like weapons, while voices chanted about military meltdowns and daddy's protection. The footage appeared on social media within minutes, edited with mocking commentary about privileged military kids who couldn't handle real-world problems. Harper's humiliation became viral content, her pain transformed into entertainment for teenagers raised on cruelty as comedy. She reported everything to administration with military precision, documenting times, witnesses, evidence with the thoroughness her father had drilled into her. Vice Principal Harrison dismissed her concerns as adjustment difficulties, suggesting Harper needed counseling to help her adapt to civilian social dynamics. His patronizing tone carried the unmistakable suggestion that military families were inherently problematic, unable to integrate into normal community life. Harper noticed Coach Martinez lurking in administrative meetings, his presence during her complaints suggesting coordination between athletic department and school officials. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't random bullying enabled by indifferent adults. This was systematic harassment, orchestrated by the very people supposed to protect students. A conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of school leadership. Her hand unconsciously moved to her mother's locket during stressful moments, seeking comfort from the woman who'd taught her that strength came from standing up for what's right. The silver chain had been her mother's final gift, a tangible connection to values that seemed absent from Westfield High's toxic culture. Every time Harper touched that locket, she felt her mother's voice reminding her that Collins women didn't back down from bullies, no matter how powerful they seemed. The escalation to physical violence came during Harper's third week, when Trent orchestrated an accident in the crowded hallway between classes. Bryce provided distraction by starting an argument with another student, while teammates formed a human wall blocking security camera angles. Coach Martinez scheduled a convenient bathroom break during the incident window, ensuring no authority figure would witness what was about to unfold. Harper fell down the concrete stairwell with bone-jarring impact, her memorial locket chain snapping as she tumbled. Trent's massive hand closed around the silver pendant before she could react, pocketing her mother's memory while his teammates helped her up with theatrical concern. Security footage would show helpful students assisting a clumsy new girl, nothing more suspicious than teenage kindness in action. The loss of her mother's locket broke something fundamental in Harper's military composure. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, tears leaked from her eyes as she realized these monsters had stolen the last tangible connection to her mother. The cruelty was surgical in its precision, targeting the exact vulnerability that would cause maximum psychological damage. They hadn't just hurt her body, they'd violated her most sacred memory. But Harper's military first aid training kicked in automatically, her father's voice echoing in her mind about documentation and evidence preservation. She photographed her bruising patterns with forensic precision, noted witness positions and response times, documented the exact mechanism of her fall with the thoroughness of an accident investigation report. Her systematic approach unnerved the watching bullies, who expected tears and helplessness rather than clinical analysis. Harper recognized the tactical pattern emerging from weeks of harassment. This wasn't random teenage cruelty. It was a coordinated campaign designed to force her withdrawal from school. The precision timing, the strategic witness placement, the administrative cover-up, all indicated sophisticated planning beyond typical high school social dynamics. Someone with authority and experience was directing this operation, using students as weapons against a target they wanted eliminated. The final assault came during Harper's fourth week at Westfield, when Coach Martinez orchestrated the garbage dumping incident that would trigger his own destruction. The attack was scheduled during his prep period, when hallways emptied and security presence diminished to skeleton crews. Rotted cafeteria food mixed with personal insults would destroy Harper's mother's memorial photo, contaminate her backpack contents, and provide the emotional breakdown they needed to justify her removal. Trent approached Harper's desk during advanced biology, his massive frame blocking escape routes while Bryce and teammates formed a perimeter. The garbage bag in his hands contained weeks of accumulated cafeteria waste, food scraps that had been deliberately allowed to rot for maximum psychological impact. Kelsey positioned herself for optimal filming angles, her phone ready to capture Harper's humiliation for social media distribution. Coach Martinez watched from his office window, his smile reflecting the satisfaction of a predator about to claim his prey. The timing was perfect, the setup flawless. The outcome guaranteed to provide justification for Harper's transfer to alternative education programs. No administrator would question removing an emotionally unstable military brat who couldn't handle civilian school pressures, especially when video evidence showed her violent outburst against helpful classmates. The garbage hit Harper's desk with sickening impact, splattering decomposed food across her mother's memorial photograph. Rotted vegetables and spoiled milk soaked through textbooks, contaminating homework assignments and personal belongings with the stench of deliberate cruelty. Harper's last connection to her mother disappeared under a layer of institutional malice, designed to break her spirit completely. Harper finally snapped, her military composure cracking under months of systematic abuse. She screamed at Trent with raw fury, her voice carrying across the classroom like a battle cry from someone pushed beyond human endurance. Students gathered to film her breakdown, phones capturing every second of pain for viral entertainment. The moment they'd orchestrated was unfolding exactly as planned, providing perfect justification for her elimination. Coach Martinez emerged from his office with theatrical timing, playing the concerned educator, responding to classroom disruption. His voice carried false authority as he publicly blamed Harper's emotional instability, suggesting that military families struggled with civilian life integration. The performance was masterful, positioning him as the caring professional dealing with a troubled student's outburst. Documents were already prepared for Harper's transfer to alternative education, the paperwork bearing timestamps from before the incident occurred. This wasn't responsive discipline, it was premeditated elimination disguised as student support. The conspiracy reached deeper than Harper had imagined, involving administrative complicity at levels that would shock federal investigators. But Harper's phone had recorded everything, capturing 3 weeks of crystal-clear audio evidence, including Coach Martinez coaching harassment tactics. Trent's voice bragging about previous victims who were transferred out. Bryce discussing grade manipulation for athletes. And most damning, Coach Martinez's phone conversation about Harper being a problem requiring military-style solution. The quiet military girl they'd tried to destroy had been gathering evidence with the precision of a seasoned intelligence operative. As Harper listened to weeks of recorded conspiracy, her father's training took over completely. She recognized patterns from military anti-terrorism briefings, coordinated harassment campaigns designed to neutralize perceived threats. This wasn't high school bullying. It was psychological warfare conducted by adults who'd weaponized children against a target they wanted eliminated. Colonel Collins answered Harper's emergency call on the first ring, his voice shifting to combat mode as she transmitted tactical intelligence about the coordinated harassment campaign. Years of military experience allowed him to instantly recognize the threat pattern. Systematic elimination tactics he'd seen used against military families by hostile civilian populations. His daughter wasn't facing teenage bullies, she was under assault by organized conspirators. The colonel's connections to base security triggered immediate protocols. Federal contacts, who specialized in civil rights violations, received intelligence briefings within minutes. What Harper didn't know was that Westfield High was already under federal investigation, her case representing the missing piece that would bring down an entire conspiracy. Federal agents were mobilizing while Harper sat in administrative detention, her evidence uploading to FBI servers through military encrypted channels. Coach Martinez thought he'd eliminated another problem student. Instead, he'd provided federal prosecutors with the smoking gun they needed to prove systematic civil rights violations. The trap was set for the following morning, when Harper would return to school wearing FBI recording equipment. Coach Martinez's plan to publicly humiliate her into final submission would instead capture federal evidence of conspiracy to violate civil rights, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. The quiet military girl they'd underestimated was about to demonstrate what happened when systematic oppression met military precision. As Harper prepared for the final confrontation, touching her mother's locket for strength, she remembered Colonel Collins's most important lesson. Sometimes the greatest battles were won not through force, but through careful documentation and strategic patience. Tomorrow, Coach Martinez would discover that targeting a military family meant facing the full weight of federal justice, delivered with the efficiency that only a decorated Marine colonel could orchestrate. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westfield High's parking lot, where federal agents in unmarked vehicles waited for Harper's signal. Coach Martinez arrived early, confident in his plan to eliminate the last witness to his systematic campaign. What he didn't know was that every word, every gesture, every moment of conspiracy would be recorded for federal prosecutors who'd been hunting his operation for months. Harper walked through Westfield's front doors for what everyone assumed would be her final day. Carrying recording equipment, that would capture evidence of the largest civil rights conspiracy in Colorado education history. The quiet military girl they'd tried to break was about to show them what real strength looked like. Backed by the full authority of the United States federal government and one very angry Marine colonel who was done playing by civilian rules. Harper entered Westfield High at 7:53 a.m., wearing a wire that would record the final chapter of Coach Martinez's career. The FBI equipment, hidden beneath her school blazer, represented 3 months of federal investigation. Triggered by her father's military intelligence contacts, who recognized systematic civil rights violations when they saw them. What Coach Martinez had dismissed as routine student discipline was actually felony conspiracy, documented with the precision that only a decorated Marine colonel's daughter could provide. The cafeteria buzzed with predatory anticipation as Trent Sullivan's crew gathered for what they assumed would be Harper's final humiliation. Coach Martinez had orchestrated this morning's confrontation with military precision, positioning his players for maximum psychological impact while ensuring administrative witnesses would observe Harper's inevitable breakdown. The plan was flawless, the execution would be devastating, and the justification for her permanent removal would be ironclad. Federal agents in unmarked vehicles monitored every frequency, ready to intervene the moment Harper's safety was compromised. Colonel Collins sat in the command vehicle, his jaw clenched with the controlled fury of a father watching his daughter walk into battle. Years of combat experience had taught him patience, but watching these civilians target his family tested every ounce of military discipline he possessed. Kelsey Morrison's fingers flew across her phone screen, coordinating the social media assault that would document Harper's destruction for viral entertainment. Her followers waited for the promised content, hungry for another military brat meltdown that would generate thousands of views. The hashtag was already trending locally, anticipation building for what promised to be the most spectacular breakdown in Westfield High history. Harper moved through the hallways with eerie calm, her mother's locket newly repaired and gleaming against her throat. The silver pendant had been returned by evidence technicians overnight, cleaned and restored as a symbol of justice, delayed but not denied. Every step toward the cafeteria felt like walking toward destiny, carrying the weight of every silenced victim who'd suffered under this corrupt system. Coach Martinez watched from his office window, satisfaction radiating from his smile as the final phase of his elimination campaign began. 3 weeks of systematic harassment had been building to this moment, when Harper Collins would finally break completely and provide justification for her removal. The alternative education transfer documents were already signed, waiting only for this morning's incident to make them official. Trent approached Harper's usual table with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences, his massive frame casting shadows across her seated form. The cafeteria fell silent as students recognized the setup, phones emerging like weapons as audiences prepared to witness systematic destruction. This wasn't random bullying. It was institutional theater designed to entertain crowds while eliminating problems. Well, well, Trent's voice carried across the silent cafeteria, amplified by the acoustic design that made every word audible to hundreds of witnesses. If it isn't the little military princess, still pretending she belongs here. His teammates formed a semicircle, blocking escape routes with the precision of predators who'd practiced this choreography countless times before. Harper remained perfectly still, her breathing controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The FBI equipment recorded every word, transmitting real-time audio to federal agents who were building criminal cases with each syllable. What Trent didn't know was that his casual cruelty was providing evidence for federal prosecutors who specialized in civil rights violations. "I heard your daddy's coming to visit today," Bryce Patterson sneered, his voice carrying the false bravado of someone protected by powerful connections. "Hope he brings tissues for when his little princess has another meltdown." The reference to Colonel Collins's scheduled meeting with administration was intelligence that could only have come from official sources, proving coordination between coaching staff and school leadership. Coach Martinez's voice crackled through Trent's earpiece, invisible to observers, but crystal clear to FBI recording equipment. "Make it good," the coach whispered, his words captured for federal evidence. "Push her until she snaps, then back off and play victim." Administration needs this breakdown to justify the transfer. The conspiracy was unfolding in real time, providing prosecutors with smoking gun evidence of premeditated harassment. Harper's hand moved to her mother's locket, drawing strength from the memory of a woman who'd taught her that courage meant standing up to bullies, regardless of their power. The silver pendant caught morning light streaming through cafeteria windows, a beacon of hope in the darkness of institutional corruption. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper encouragement, reminding Harper that Collins' women didn't surrender to cowards. "You know what I think." Trent leaned closer, his breath hot against Harper's face as students pressed forward to capture every moment. "I think you're just another spoiled military brat who can't handle real life, hiding behind daddy's uniform because you're too weak to fight your own battles." The insult was calculated to trigger maximum emotional response, designed to provoke the breakdown that would justify Harper's elimination. The cafeteria held its collective breath, waiting for Harper's explosion that would provide viral content and administrative cover. Phones recorded from every angle, capturing what they assumed would be another spectacular meltdown from the military girl who couldn't adapt to civilian life. The anticipation was electric, the setup perfect, the outcome guaranteed. Harper stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the chaos surrounding her. "You're right about one thing, Trent," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the silent cafeteria with unnatural clarity. "I am my father's daughter, and Collins' women don't back down from bullies." The statement carried undertones that made several students shift uncomfortably, sensing something different in her demeanor. Coach Martinez's smile faltered as he watched Harper's unexpected composure, his carefully orchestrated breakdown failing to materialize according to script. Years of experience had taught him to recognize when students were about to crack, but Harper Collins showed none of the usual signs of impending collapse. Instead, she radiated the calm confidence of someone holding winning cards in a high-stakes game. "But what you don't understand," Harper continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "is that my father taught me something very important about bullies." The cafeteria was dead silent now, every student straining to hear what would come next. Even Trent seemed uncertain, his usual bravado wavering as Harper's unexpected response disrupted his practiced routine. At exactly 8:47 a.m., the cafeteria doors burst open with military precision. Colonel James Collins strode into the room flanked by FBI agents and base security personnel, their badges gleaming under fluorescent lights as hundreds of students scrambled for their phones. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of federal boots on linoleum floors and the collective gasp of teenagers realizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Coach Martinez's face drained of color as he recognized the federal authorities, his comfortable world of athletic privilege crumbling in real time. The man who'd orchestrated systematic harassment campaigns against military families was about to discover what happened when federal investigators had been building cases for months. His conspiracy had finally attracted the attention of people with real power, and the reckoning would be swift and merciless. Bradley Martinez. Agent Sarah Chen's voice cut through the cafeteria like a blade. Her FBI credentials raised high enough for every phone camera to capture. You're under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, obstruction of justice, and child endangerment. The federal charges landed like bombs in the silent room, each accusation representing years of systematic abuse, finally meeting consequences. Trent Sullivan's massive frame seemed to shrink as federal agents surrounded him, his athletic scholarships evaporating with each Miranda warning. The Golden Boy quarterback who'd terrorized students with impunity was learning that federal crimes carried consequences no amount of family money could erase. His future was collapsing in real time, broadcast live on dozens of social media platforms. Bryce Patterson's connection to Coach Martinez became a liability rather than protection as agents separated conspirators for individual questioning. The nephew who'd felt untouchable because of family connections was discovering that federal investigations didn't respect local political arrangements. His uncle's corruption had made him an accessory to federal crimes, carrying penalties that would reshape his entire future. Kelsey Morrison's phone was seized as evidence before she could delete the coordinating messages with Coach Martinez, her social media empire becoming a federal crime scene. The girl who'd weaponized digital platforms against vulnerable students was learning that cyberbullying could constitute federal harassment when conducted at institutional direction. Her viral ambitions had attracted the wrong kind of attention from investigators who specialized in online crimes. Colonel Collins approached his daughter with the controlled emotion of a military father watching his child survive a combat operation. The reunion was captured by dozens of cameras, creating images that would later symbolize military family resilience against civilian institutional corruption. Harper's composure throughout the federal intervention demonstrated the strength that her harassers had tried so desperately to break. Evidence recovered from the defendant's devices reveals a systematic campaign targeting military families. Agent Chen announced to the assembled crowd, her words carrying across the cafeteria like a federal indictment of the entire system. This investigation encompasses multiple school districts and spans several years, representing one of the largest civil rights conspiracies in Colorado education history. Principal Daniels emerged from his office in handcuffs, his administrative authority replaced by federal custody as investigators revealed his knowledge of the harassment campaigns. The man who'd enabled Coach Martinez's systematic abuse was facing federal prison time, his career destroyed by the same corruption he'd helped orchestrate. The message was clear: institutional protection of civil rights violations carried severe personal consequences. Vice Principal Harrison's dismissive treatment of Harper's complaints became evidence of administrative conspiracy, his patronizing attitude toward military families exposed as part of a broader pattern of discrimination. Federal investigators had recordings of planning meetings where school officials discussed strategies for eliminating problem families, conversations that would become centerpieces of criminal trials. The cafeteria evacuation proceeded with military efficiency as federal agents secured evidence and separated witnesses for individual interviews. Students who'd participated in harassment campaigns found themselves facing potential criminal charges, their phones seized and social media accounts frozen pending investigation. The viral entertainment they'd created was becoming evidence in federal court, their cruelty preserved forever in legal documents. Harper's 3 weeks of systematic documentation proved crucial as federal prosecutors built cases against multiple defendants. Her military training providing evidence quality that professional investigators admired. The quiet girl they'd tried to destroy had been gathering intelligence with precision that would make career federal agents proud, turning their own conspiracy against them with devastating effectiveness. News vans surrounded Westfield High by 10:30 a.m., their satellite trucks beaming images of federal arrests to news networks across the country. The story of military family harassment was resonating beyond Colorado, triggering conversations about institutional discrimination and federal oversight of education systems. Harper's courage was inspiring similar investigations in school districts nationwide. Coach Martinez's office was stripped of decades of awards and accolades as federal agents discovered evidence of harassment campaigns spanning his entire career. The man who'd built his reputation on athletic success was revealed as a systematic predator who'd targeted vulnerable students with military precision. His coaching legacy was being rewritten as a cautionary tale about unchecked institutional power. Athletic department budgets were frozen pending investigation as federal auditors discovered financial irregularities connected to the harassment campaigns. Booster donations had been used to fund character assassination efforts, turning community support for sports programs into weapons against military families. The corruption reached deeper than anyone had imagined, implicating donors and community leaders in federal conspiracies. Trent Sullivan's Division I scholarship offers were rescinded within hours of his arrest. College recruiters fleeing from association with federal civil rights violations. The golden boy who'd expected athletic success to excuse any behavior was learning that criminal charges carried consequences beyond high school social dynamics. His future was being rewritten in federal custody, broadcast live for former victims to witness. The federal investigation revealed that Harper was victim number 23 in Coach Martinez's systematic targeting of military families, previous cases having been covered up through administrative manipulation and family intimidation. Parents who'd quietly transferred their children to avoid continued harassment were coming forward with similar stories, their silence finally broken by Harper's courage. Chen family's lawsuit against the school district gained federal support as investigators revealed the true extent of administrative cover-ups. Their daughter's attempted suicide representing the predictable outcome of systematic institutional abuse. The civil case that had been stalled by local political influence was now backed by federal evidence, guaranteeing justice that local courts had failed to provide. Westfield High's football program was suspended indefinitely as federal investigators determined that athletic activities had been weaponized against vulnerable students. The revenue-generating sports becoming tools for institutional discrimination. The millions of dollars in program funding would be redirected toward victim compensation and civil rights compliance, transforming the source of corruption into a foundation for justice. Superintendent Williams was removed from office by emergency school board action as federal investigators revealed her knowledge of the systematic harassment campaigns, her administrative oversight having enabled years of civil rights violations. The woman who'd prioritized athletic revenue over student safety was facing federal charges that would end her education career permanently. Community reactions split along predictable lines as military families shared stories of harassment, while athletic boosters defended Coach Martinez, their tribal loyalties preventing recognition of systematic criminal behavior. The federal investigation was forcing Westfield to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional priorities, challenging communities to choose between sports success and basic human decency. Harper's testimony before federal investigators provided crucial intelligence about the psychological warfare tactics used against military families, her father's training having prepared her to recognize and document systematic oppression. The quiet girl they'd tried to silence was becoming the star witness in cases that would reshape education law, her courage inspiring similar investigations nationwide. Social media platforms exploded with support for HarperCollins as her story spread beyond Colorado, military families across the country sharing similar experiences of civilian institutional hostility. The hashtag that had been created to mock her breakdown was transformed into a rallying cry for military family rights. Digital platforms becoming tools for justice rather than harassment. Federal civil rights monitors were assigned to Westfield High pending completion of systematic reforms, their presence ensuring that future harassment campaigns would face immediate federal intervention. The school that had operated as a harassment factory was being transformed into a model for military family integration, demonstrating that federal oversight could force institutional change. Coach Martinez's plea hearing drew national media attention as his systematic targeting of military families became a federal case study in institutional discrimination. His coaching career serving as evidence that athletic success couldn't excuse criminal behavior. The man who'd felt untouchable was learning that federal prosecutors didn't respect local political arrangements. His conviction carrying penalties that would deter similar conspiracies nationwide. Military family advocacy organizations embraced Harper's story as evidence that systematic documentation could overcome institutional corruption. Her courage providing a roadmap for similar cases across the country. The quiet military girl had become a symbol of resistance against civilian hostility, proving that federal law provided protection when local institutions failed. Harper's recovery of her mother's locket carried symbolic weight as federal investigators returned evidence that had been stolen during coordinated harassment campaigns. The silver pendant representing justice delayed, but ultimately delivered. The chain had been repaired with gold threading that made the brake lines visible, creating beauty from damage while preserving evidence of institutional cruelty. 3 years later, Harper Collins graduated as Westfield High's valedictorian, her academic excellence serving as final proof that harassment campaigns had failed to break her spirit. The school that had tried to eliminate her had been transformed by her courage, creating an environment where military families could thrive without fear of institutional retaliation. The HarperCollins Foundation for Military Child Advocacy generated millions in funding for legal support and educational resources, transforming her personal trauma into systemic change that protected vulnerable families nationwide. Federal legislation bearing her name required annual civil rights audits for schools serving military populations, preventing future conspiracies through mandatory federal oversight. Coach Martinez served 4 years in federal prison for civil rights violations, his case becoming required study material in education law courses as an example of institutional corruption meeting federal justice. The man who'd systematically targeted military families was prohibited from working in education upon release, his criminal record serving as permanent protection for future potential victims. Trent Sullivan's criminal record prevented college admission and military service, his harassment campaigns having eliminated the future he'd taken for granted while tormenting others. The golden boy who'd expected athletic success to excuse any behavior was working retail jobs, his viral videos serving as permanent reminders of consequences for systematic cruelty. Westfield High's transformation into a model military-friendly institution attracted national recognition. The school that had once symbolized institutional hostility becoming an example of successful federal intervention. Military families relocated to the district specifically for educational opportunities, proving that systemic change could create environments where service members' children thrived. Harper's congressional testimony inspired federal legislation requiring military family liaisons in school districts serving base populations. Her personal experience informing policy that protected thousands of vulnerable children nationwide. The quiet girl who'd been targeted for elimination had become a voice for systematic change, proving that individual courage could reshape institutional culture. The documentary featuring Harper's story won Academy Award recognition. Her transformation from victim to advocate, inspiring millions of viewers to recognize and report institutional discrimination. The silver locket she wore during interviews had become a symbol of resilience, proof that even broken things could be made stronger through proper repair. Military academies competed for Harper's admission. Her combination of academic excellence and advocacy leadership representing exactly the kind of character they sought to develop in future officers. Her acceptance to West Point with full honors carried special significance. The military brat who'd been told she didn't belong in civilian schools was returning to the institution that had shaped her values. Federal civil rights law was permanently strengthened by precedents established in Harper's case. Her systematic documentation providing legal foundations for protecting military families against institutional discrimination nationwide. The evidence she'd gathered with military precision had created legal protections that would serve thousands of families facing similar harassment. Coach Martinez's systematic targeting of military families became a federal case study taught in law enforcement academies. His methods serving as training material for investigators learning to recognize institutional discrimination. The man who'd perfected harassment campaigns was unknowingly educating federal agents to detect and prosecute similar conspiracies. Harper's mother's memorial locket became a permanent exhibit in the Smithsonian's Military Family Collection. The silver pendant representing resilience in the face of institutional hostility. The chain that had been broken during systematic harassment was displayed with gold threading visible, symbolizing that damage could be transformed into strength through proper support. Every time someone asked Harper what she'd tell other kids facing impossible odds, she touched that locket and delivered the same message her experience had taught her. Document everything. Trust the federal process. And remember that bullies count on victims staying silent. Perhaps that's the real lesson here. Perhaps courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and speaking up anyway. Because somewhere out there, another military child is sitting in a classroom, wondering if anyone would believe their story of institutional harassment. Now they know the answer. Federal law protects military families. Systematic documentation defeats institutional corruption. And individual courage can reshape systems that seem impossibly powerful. The girl who'd been dumped with garbage had transformed her trauma into federal legislation. Her systematic harassment becoming the foundation for protecting thousands of military families from institutional discrimination. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from being broken and rebuilt. Sometimes the quietest voices, when they refuse to stay silent, can move mountains that seemed immovable. Harper Collins still wears her mother's locket, now repaired with gold threading that makes the break lines visible, stronger than before. Those cracks remind her that the most powerful resistance comes not from avoiding damage, but from transforming trauma into systemic change that protects others from similar harm. That's the legacy of military families. That's the power of refusing to be silenced. That's what happens when systematic oppression meets federal justice delivered with military precision.